Before we begin, thank you very much to a new patron for joining the Patreon campaign. Now, most patrons who join the Patreon campaign are a new patron, but this one is a new patron who also happens to be a new patron. So thank you to a new patron. I do appreciate the support, and it is the Patreon that allows me to continue to do this for you guys on a daily basis. So anyone who is capable of pitching in just $1 a month, I do appreciate it greatly. You do keep me doing this. So, thank you for the silly shout out. I love the silly shout outs. So, we're going to be talking about upgrades today, which is generally a realm of Transformers I completely avoid because my mindset has always been, one, I don't want to pay double the cost of a figure just to slightly improve something about it, and also, I'm always in the mindset of enjoy it for what it is, do not hate it for what it isn't. It's why we have disagreements about what a plastic addict level toy is. It's why I look for the worst of the worst when that series comes around. And I know, it's been a long time. I know. The point is, because of those mindsets, I very rarely poke my head into third-party upgrades. But then this thing comes along and completely grabs my attention, not only because it looks great, and it provides you that thing that so far Hasbro has not provided with the new Voyager Optimus Prime, but also it's doing something even better than what the original Takara version did, because this version will actually transform into the full fire truck vehicle mode that we never got, ever. So you're telling me this animated Optimus Prime, this one that I actually like as a toy better because it doesn't do that stupid spinny thing with the legs, you're telling me that this toy can actually be a much more realized version of what was in the cartoon than the original animated toy line ever could. I am now intrigued. However, they also went and did this, which is the most genius repaint and retool they could have possibly done. This upgrades that Motormaster from being like a fun curiosity of a toy to really cool highlight piece. This is just a really cool thing to do with that toy. This is genius. I love this. And again, forms a satisfying trailer for Motormaster, so hey, does everything, right? I'm on the fence of which one I actually want. I could see myself owning both, but I don't want to drop the money for both right now. But that said, they took me back to what really pulled me in for as far as third-party upgrade stuff goes. It gave me a nice little nostalgia hit. So I'm going to dig into the past and show you about where we started when it came to that particular realm of third-party toy. And the earliest one I can remember is this. Yes, it's just a stand, but it's also one of the most important stands in Transformer history. Armada Unicron, if you never played with the toy before, had no way of standing up properly in planet mode, where the jaws are forward and the ring is all the way around it. Well, at the time, Hasbro didn't figure out they could just throw a display stand in with something, so there was no way to actually display it the way Unicron normally sits. You would have to rest it on its back where it was flat, and then Unicron is staring up at your ceiling. And that's not fun. That's not what Unicron's supposed to do. So to the rescue came Unicron.com, appropriately enough, and produced a stand that stayed relevant for years because of how many times they retooled and reissued that Armada Unicron mold. So yeah, it's a very simple part. It's a very simple beginning, but it's a very necessary one. Where upgrade sets really start exploding is when we get into Transformers Classics. One of the earliest ones I can remember is just like a full proper upgrade set, new parts for an existing toy. That is going to Beelzebub's Devil Horn set, which is to upgrade your Classics Cliffjumper with a new head and a few extra new parts and weapons to give it the proper feel of Cliffjumper, because Classics, we remember, was a rushed toy line. It was there to just fill a gap between the end of Cybertron and the beginning of the movie line in 2007. And as such, they didn't have time to develop a lot of what they originally intended to. Optimus was supposed to have a trailer, for instance. You know, we got a repaint of Bumblebee as Cliffjumper with no new head different accessories. So yeah, we find, like, for the first time, a product came out that had a need that needed to be filled, that left collectors wanting for more, and that's how you start upgrade sets. It's really how you start third party in general. This was so frustrating that this is also the set that gave birth to TF Club, and they did their own upgrade set for Cliffjumper. Again, new head, new spoiler, new bumper. This one actually aimed to give this one a completely different feel from Bumblebee, and somewhat successful. Like, yeah, like it's doing more than the Devil Horns set is doing, so I'll give it credit for that. But like I said, Classics was that line that kind of kicked off a collector need for more accuracy, more parts, more pieces that feel like they should go there. Classics Optimus Prime, for instance, had, I think, like 3 different companies doing trailers for it. The one that always confused me was the BST trailer. I never understood this thing. And this thing, like, I think everyone who was around at the time remembers this one as just like that weird one that always sat around in the online stores, never moving, because, yeah, like, everyone else just kind of did stuff that made sense. I believe, if I remember right, there was one that was just basically the G1 trailer. There was one that tried to do something a little bit more aesthetically matching the new look of Optimus Prime. And then you had this thing thrown in the mix where it looks like you just glued one trailer's back half to a different trailer's front half. The back half is very G1 Optimus Prime. Okay, I understand that. And then the front half just looks like some sci-fi box, Aesthetically, it doesn't really look like a trailer, nor does it match the aesthetic of the Prime. I genuinely have no idea what someone was thinking when they came up with this one. Like, to this day, it confuses me. But because they either made so many of them, or because it sold so poorly because of that weird aesthetic, it's the one that most people remember. Because it was around forever. I think the one fun caveat to that particular trailer is the fact that it didn't just have just like the opening sides and the one ramp at the back. There were ramps all the way down the side of it. At least it tried to do a different base mode than usual. I'll give it that much credit here. But really, if we're talking Classics upgrades, there's only one thing we need to talk about. The City Commander set is the stuff of legend today. I can remember how amazed everyone was when this dropped. This wasn't just a gray box. This wasn't just a few parts and a new head, This was a complete makeover, a complete new shell for the robot mode so that Classics Ultra Magnus, who was just a white repaint Optimus Prime, could actually be Ultra Magnus. And yeah, like, it was exciting. We'd never gotten anything like that before. I bought it. Everyone bought it. Like, this is probably one of the most successful third-party toys ever. Everyone had to have one of these because it did everything we wanted Magnus to do. And it helped that it looked pretty good at the time as well. And even in the trailer mode. Now, to be fair, in order to get this trailer mode to work, they had to have this gigantic block in the middle of it that holds all the armor pieces together. And said block can kind of form into a gigantic gun for Ultra Magnus, but it's a little bit iffy. It very much feels like this is the leftover junk. But hey, it does give him personality. It gives him something of a little bit of uniqueness from your standard Magnus, aside from just the different aesthetic. And look at the trailer. To me, the trailer actually blends fairly well with the more modern, slightly futuristic aesthetic that Classics Optimus Prime went for. I think it's a good match. Overall, this was a fantastic piece. And everyone went nuts over it when it first came out. Everyone had to talk about it. And not a surprise when Fans Project followed up with the Protector armor for Classics Rodimus. Now, you're getting even more ambitious. It's not enough now to do like this is how Ultra Magnus is supposed to play, and we're coming up with armor that will actually let you play with Ultra Magnus the way he was intended to be. No, now we are coming up with something completely new that we haven't done before. We're turning Hot Rod into Rodimus Prime, just like if this was the 86 movie. Keep in mind, this was long before Power of the Primes, where Hasbro did their own Hot Rod that could transform with this trailer into Rodimus Prime. Well before that. Well before. So no one had ever attempted this on any official level. And I think it came out pretty good. I mean, it's got a few weird quirks to it because of how they're trying to work Rodimus's engineering into a full, like, combiner leaders class size toy. But it works, and it's a cool look, too. Like, I like the molded flames. I like how, like, they actually added 3 dimensions to that. It was a fascinating period. It's fascinating looking back on it from a design standpoint. Because, like, you look, even the trailer. The trailer is, yeah, this is absolutely Rodimus. Yeah, I like how the exhausts on here have now emerged with the flame job that's running down the side of the trailer. It actually gives it some kind of purpose for being there, you know? It looks really, really cool. I like that it's, keeping this, the classic shape while still doing a lot of new stuff too. Again, it feels in line with what Classics was trying to do with those toys. Make them feel familiar, but also upgrade them somewhat, make them feel fresh. And it really goes in with that design style that Classics went for, of like, it's recognizable, but we're doing something new. And it's fun because it gives you so much more artistic license to do whatever with the designs. And the fun, interesting part about that is they weren't doing it because they had a different vision for how Ultra Magnus should look. They didn't have a different vision for how Rodimus Prime should function. They made their own interpretation so they wouldn't get sued. This is the very early setting for third-party stuff. No one had tried to make a full figure that potentially infringed on the intellectual property of Hasbro and Takara Tomy. We hadn't done that yet. This was just making parts to make these toys better. And yeah, it turned it into a different character, but we had to be careful about that. We had to be really careful about that because we didn't know where the line was yet. But I kind of miss that, where the demand isn't accuracy. We're kind of getting into that now, where there's now new interpretations in third party, rather than just trying to make them movie accurate or cartoon accurate, If we're going back into upgrade sets like this, where big hunk parts completely change a character in a toy, we got to talk about Mobine from Make Toys. So this was that one tank that split into limbs for your Power Core Combiner figure, whose name escapes me at the moment. Heavy Tread. Heavy Tread was probably one of the best Power Core toys. Only one I can think of that looked great in all 3 of his modes. All 3 of his modes were standout. And that was such a refreshing figure for that line. That proved that toy line really could have worked, right? So the whole idea behind Power Core Combiner was they were testing the waters to see if kids would still like the combining gimmick. So they would, this basically set up what eventually became Combiner Wars. It just happened to be a very poorly executed toy line. And one of the biggest faults to that toy line that I always pointed to is the fact that the automorphing limbs, which were done to provide kids with a little bit of gimmickry play, really dragged those toys down, both functionally and aesthetically, because you couldn't give them good articulation, and they were just spindly little arms that looked like they were made of shrapnel, because they had to have that like accordion plastic look to them for that gimmick. I always said if you just had dedicated limbs that were just well articulated, these toys would shine. And this is the proof of that. This set, makes a companion tank in vehicle mode, combines in robot mode, looks fantastic. This is also the set that would eventually be redone and given its own original figure to create Paladin Chaos, our first third-party Dreamwave-style Fallen toy, which again is one of the best-looking third-party toys there is. But that gets into full-on third-party new figure. We're here talking about upgrade sets, right? So don't go too far into that. But if we're talking like old-school upgrade sets, if we're talking about those, we have to get into CrazyDevy. CrazyDevy might be the first, I don't know, scam company of Transformers, of third-party. Their whole thing, for the most part, was providing upgrades for your G1 combiners, right? And they would, obviously, they'd put a lot of attention into Devastator, the name implies that, but they danced around for a lot of them. If you wanted a larger sword for your Menasor, you know, they provided things like that. The Devastator, the weird thing about them, and what we never really understood, was the fact that all of their releases were done one at a time. So you see on this Devastator here, you can see it's G1 Devastator. It's the Encore figure. But you're looking at new articulated hands, new forearms. You're looking at a new chest piece that's more cartoon accurate, a more articulated head that also has an LED in it. You're looking at articulated hips with knees, and Scrapper was never meant to be balancing with a bended knee. I don't know why you attempted this. But the thing about them was all of these parts were usually released one at a time. You wouldn't just buy a box of upgrade parts like you do today. You would buy just the fists, or you would buy just the head. And one of the justifications to that is not everyone's going to want every single upgrade part, so this way they can just piecemeal it and like a la carte it. Okay, and that's fair, except the prices they asked for are absolutely absurd. Absolutely ridiculous pricing on upgrade sets. So we asked, well, then they asked, like, why can't you just pack them all at once? And like one of the answers was, well, it's too expensive to get all of these different molds and parts done. It's too many machines running at once. But if you actually gang molded these together to sell as one big batch of parts, that means there's only one production run on one or two sets of molds. You don't have to do it like this. The reality is, they basically invented DLC for toys. Your Devastator would start off just getting a new head or just replacing that hip section. But by the time you got all of the stuff, all the upgrades, you're into this thing for a couple hundred more than what you started off with just the G1 reissue set. You know, and they milked you for that. And that, you know, compared to like what that Encore set went for, it wasn't even that much back then. It really wasn't that much. It's absurd. It's absurd how expensive their stuff was, considering a lot of it really didn't do a whole lot. For one reason or another, just as an example, they thought that your Piranacon needed to have ball-jointed ankles. Who's ever looked at a G1 combiner and thought, I need ball-jointed ankles on this thing? Yeah, Piranacon, because of the way he transforms, can technically splay his hips, but it's kind of stuck in certain positions because it's on a ratchet joint, so you really don't need ball joints there. Also, I'd be very hesitant to put a heavy figure on thin ball joints like that. That seems risky to me. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. So you do weird things like that. Borderline pointless things. But none of it matches what they did with Predaking more than once. So they did new wings, just as an example for Predaking. Now, yeah, if you like G1 Predaking and you saw him in the cartoon and look at his toy, you go, yeah, those are really tiny wings for such a big bot. So yeah, bigger wings, easy upgrade set to create, right? The wings were $65. $65 for a pair of wings. You know why? Because they thought for some reason this set needed to have 14 karat gold plating. Why? Why? It's a set of wings. The other fun part about this wing set, this is the wing set that kind of broke CrazyDevy with the fandom. So they had already had a lot of negative reviews toward them because the parts they produced were kind of cheap. The material on them wasn't great, but a lot of times it's also because they didn't properly measure or test out their parts before mass producing them, meaning quite a few of them damaged your vintage figures. And the one that everyone immediately took notice of when it happened was Predaking, because installing these wings did damage Dive Bomb's original wings. And when you're doing that on a vintage Transformer, that's not fair. That's no go. No, not doing that. Not doing that. Nope, nope. That's where a lot of people started taking attention of how shoddy their work was. That's where their downfall began. Oh, but the fun one, the one that'll never be topped for me. Okay, so just as a game, just for fun, take a look at Predaking here. Okay, now proportionally, like, what do you see? It was the main problem with this toy. And yeah, it is in the proportions, because the wings are too small. I'll give them credit for that. Yes, they are. But you've also got a very small body, because the main body is the size of everybody else. So when you're thinking of like upgrade sets for like a G1 Predaking, my thought would be to have like some kind of extenders for its parts. In particular, I wouldn't mind having like some extra shell that could slot into the shoulder joints on Razor Claw to widen the chest out a little bit and then stick the arms back onto. And likewise for the legs. I wouldn't mind those legs looking a little bit longer. You know, that way it just gives you this better proportion. Like, it's like you give them the stature that you expect Predaking to have from the show. So yeah, like covers for the hips that also did the same thing of connecting on Razor Claw and then connecting again to the leg bots. That would be my thought, right? Well, they thought the proportions were off as well. So CrazyDevy's solution: blocks. 2 plastic blocks that they charge $35 for. 2 flat gray blocks to raise Predaking's height about half an inch. $35. If the wings didn't sink them, this did. If the wings didn't do it, this is the final blow. And again, they did a ton of upgrade parts for Predaking. Encore Predaking, Platinum Predaking. These were not cheap releases in the first place. You know, like one of the most expensive toys I bought back in the day was the 2010 reissue of Predaking with all the shiny gold stickers. And the idea that it would take me like another $200 and $65 for gold wings to upgrade that is absurd. So yeah, they're a funny company to talk about now. We've come a long way. We've come a long way. Like, whether it is people that are being really clever with 3D printers, or people doing incredible stuff like this to upgrade your existing toys. There's a lot of options now, and they're generally far better thought out. This set that upgrades your entire animated Optimus Prime and completely redoes the vehicle mode is the same price as a pair of wings were back in the day. Think about that for a second, and think about how much better we have it now. So, that's my look back at the history of your upgrade parts, and as always, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.